Ted! Do they know you're a fraud, Ted? Have you told them there wasn't any money, and no wonderful cabin cruiser that could sleep 12 in a crew of 6?
I kind of debated with myself about which of the two remaining characters to talk about next. Going from left to right on the select screen, which is the order I've been doing it in up until now, Nimdok is next, but sorry, Ted. Nimdok is just a more interesting character, so he's being saved for last.
You bitch!
Ted is kept in what looks like an elaborate birdcage and is apparently bombarded with lasers from every angle that appear to be reflected off of mirrors. Ted was actually the narrator of the original short story, and likely an unreliable one at that. He is extremely paranoid, and I get a kick out of his in-game animation. Watch him just look around constantly. He can't even walk across a room without looking left and right about 10 times during the trip. Poor guy.
So typical of the castles I've visited in Europe. A beautiful facade disguising ordinary stone. Appearance is everything.
Ted's scenario takes place in an old medieval castle. He is actually very well read, and you come across a lot of books that he's familiar with, like The Count of Monte Cristo and Dante's Divine Comedy. In fact, there are a lot of literary cliches in this scenario, like a damsel in distress, her evil stepmother, and a literal angel and devil. The devil is at least kind of original in that he's a guy wearing fancy red clothes rather than looking demonic, but the angel is of the straight-up wings, white robe, and halo variety. There's even a secret doorway you can open up by trying to take a sconce off the wall. Also, the damsel in question is apparently Ellen.
Why, it's Ellen!
Wow, they're just going out of their way to throw every female cliche at her they can, aren't they? I actually didn't realize who she was when I first played this, since I'd forgotten her name by the time I got to Ted's scenario, and since she acts nothing like she does in her own scenario, I just didn't make the connection. But she isn't any less annoying here, she's just annoying in a different way.
Please tell me you found my mirror. You have to find it, Ted. It's the only thing keeping my stepmother away, and it's the only thing that can finally end my suffering.
Jeez, go back to sleep and stop whining. So yeah, Ted is carrying a torch for Ellen. That's kind of cute, actually. We learned that Ted was a con artist and used women for their money. When looking at some tapestries on the wall, he makes this comment.
So many women have called me their knight in shining armor, but never Ellen.
Aww.
Did Am tell her that I loved her? Was that the secret he was referring to?
Aw, god damn it, Ted, you're supposed to be an asshole. Stop making me like you.
Aside from dishpan hands and wrinkles, this scullery maid has quite a body. Certainly wouldn't kick her out of bed.
Ah, that's more like it. So basically the object of this scenario is to find a magic mirror that Ellen needs, defeat the evil stepmother and the devil, and make a deal with a demon, all while remaining faithful to Ellen. And yes, you can choose not to do that last one. Seems like everybody wants to hit that. First there's the scullery maid who promises to give Ted the mirror if he sleeps with her. Spoiler, she doesn't. And even the evil stepmother gives him that option.
Perhaps there's something else I can do for you instead.
Well, it has been a long time since my husband left. If you can satisfy my needs as a woman, then I will help you escape.
I love his reaction, by the way, if you try to take her up on it.
You've got a deal. I'll make love to you if you'll help me to escape.
I'll do it, but I won't like it. Fortunately, this one was just testing you. It makes sense, though. Like with everyone else, Ted's past is coming back to haunt him, and ideally he's supposed to find a better way to advance the story rather than just relying on his old tricks.
Well, how can I possibly refuse such a lovely lady?
Ted eventually summons a demon called Surgat, who will open the maid's bedroom door so he can go in there and see if she's hiding the mirror. Instead, he finds another tapestry that shows the devil with a mirror. So he bugs the devil again, who gives a cryptic clue about where it is.
I hid it someplace good, someplace where an angel would never go. Now will you get off my back?
Long story short, Ted finds the mirror, Ellen dies after looking into it, Ted traps the devil inside the mirror, and Ellen floats off to heaven, and the angel goes away too. Ted breaks the mirror, trapping the devil with Surgat. An argument breaks out.
You're ruining everything. Shut up.
You shut up. One word to the boss and your little game's over before you can say holy Moses.
And they start breaking the fourth wall.
I'm the established character. You're not even supposed to be here. When this sequence ends, somebody will be expunged.
Lots of breaking. Ted demands to be shown the surface world, since his ultimate goal is to escape from Am's underground fortress. Surgat shows it to him, and Ted discovers that it's full of radiation and uninhabitable. Poor Ted's scenario has the ultimate downer ending, that there's nowhere for any of them to go. Attempting to escape will just prolong the inevitable. They all belong to Am, period. Am ends the scenario and sends him back to the fire. I've pretty much already covered the symbolism for Ted's scenario. The setting is based off of books he's read, and there's a knight in shining armor motif to describe how he would like to be regarded by Ellen.
People must have been much shorter in the Middle Ages. I'd never be able to fit into that armor.
He may have betrayed women previously, but she's different. She's the one he cares about for whatever reason. Although I think it's pretty clear that he's probably not in love with the real Ellen so much as this idealized fairy tale version of her that he dreamed up. But for what it's worth, during the final part of the game, which I'll go into more detail later, just about every character describes Am's superego as looking like an angel. But Ellen thinks of Ted for some reason.
Could that be an angel? Funny. Why did I just flash on Ted just now?
Aww.
Nimdok! How are things in the pastry core, Nimdok? Tell me again how you saw the smoke from the furnaces, and you thought they might be roasting chickens. Or don't you want to talk about all that?
Oh, Nimdok. It's hinted at that Nimdok has a dark past, but he has since forgotten it due to the fact that he is very old and senility has kicked in. And frankly, if I had Nimdok's past, I wouldn't want to remember it either. His mission is to find the lost tribe.
This compound looks familiar. But why would Am bring me here to look for a lost tribe? There are gates and fences. Who could be lost in such a secure area?
Yep, Am's logo was there instead of a swastika, and they never used any of the actual words, but that is Auschwitz. So the first thing we learn is that this guy was originally one of Nimdok's colleagues, but Nimdok had him locked up.
You know me?
I thought I did. Until you had me arrested for refusing to condone your experiments.
Also, he sounds a little like Arnold Schwarzenegger to me.
Why are you imprisoned here?
I'm the party pooper.
So Nimdok either worked for or was partners with Dr. Mengele, and they perform unnecessary experiments on patients. I'm gonna get more into that later. But yeah, you can actually choose to do that at one point. There is a child who is prepped for spinal surgery, which will cripple him for life.
Today's procedure requires the removal of the lower section of the subject's spinal cord.
You can choose to perform the surgery.
It is done. But this child will never walk again.
The subject did not look like the athletic type.
Refuse to perform the surgery, or, and I prefer this one, use the scalpel on the assistant instead.
Guards, come here quickly. Dr. Nimdok has gone berserk.
I must leave before the guards apprehend me.
I like how the audience doesn't appear to react. Is this part of the show? Also, it causes Nimdok's karma to go up. So yes, again we have someone smiling in an awkward moment. That never gets old. But yeah, between Nimdok and Ted, it's pretty easy to see who got the short end of the stick when it comes to decision making.
I will tell you where you can find a mirror if you spend some quality time in my bed.
Anyway, there is a recovery room.
It is difficult to see what purpose this surgery serves other than to mutilate the patient.
And a crematorium.
I smell burnt flesh, but this is obviously not a kitchen.
Yeah, Nimdok's scenario does not shy away from the shocking imagery, and it's just really, really uncomfortable. But considering the subject matter, I guess it should be. Back in the operating room, you find a patient/victim with wires hooked up to his eye sockets. Yikes. You can ask him questions.
What have you done to deserve removal of your eyes? Why are your optic nerves wired to the eyeballs in the jaw? Who did this to you? He has great surgical skill.
But all you'll get back is,
Please disconnect the wires.
Until you give him some anesthetic. Apparently this operation somehow gives him a second sight, and he gives you some cryptic information that'll make sense later.
A trinity of three beasts, one like us, one from the east, one from the steppes.
I have seen some shit. After that, he passes out, and you can take the jar of eyes, but make sure you hide them so the prisoners outside don't see you carrying them around. You can also take the ether, give it to a prisoner outside who got himself caught in barbed wire, and cut him free with some pliers. He'll also give you some cryptic information.
Waken the sleeper, utter the truth, and kiss him.
Then you can give the pliers to the guy that Nimdok had imprisoned, not that it'll endear him to Nimdok any. You can talk to the kid who was on the operating table earlier, and he gives you some information about a golem, and something about it seeing with its own eyes.
It will turn on you and save us.
Once you get back outside again, the prisoners have escaped. They are not letting Nimdok go so much as giving him a head start before they hunt him down.
You are an unredeemable butcher.
Once Nimdok goes to his lab, he discovers his own research in morphogenics. Am used this to deform Benny. Am is also keeping everyone alive with a serum that Nimdok created. Apparently many children had to die to make it. He also finds yet another invention, Project Perfect Image, a mirror that exposes the user's true self to them. When Nimdok looks at it, he realizes why 1945 was a significant year for him.
Oh my God, it is true. 1945, turning my Jewish parents over to the Nazis for extermination. I have found the lost tribe. It is me.
That was a hell of a revelation that I did not see coming. I figured this was all about him being a scientist and the horrible experiments he did on people. But more than that, he was Jewish and gave his parents over to the Nazis. That is heavy. The rest of this is technically optional, especially if you forget to talk to the guy stuck in the barbed wire and you end up not knowing how to resurrect the golem.
Faces of people in torture.
You can choose to walk through the wall of pain and that's it. But you don't get Nimdok's full scenario if you do.
The truth is that for me, it shall always be 1945.
Otherwise, Nimdok resurrects the golem and meets Dr. Mengele in the lab, where Nimdok can show him the mirror.
Oh my God! No!
Which will cause him to go into a state of shock and or have the golem crush his head. Once Nimdok goes outside, he meets up with his former colleague, who is totally out for blood.
Golem, destroy the lost tribe.
You can either have the golem crush his head. If you didn't kill Dr. Mengele, you can totally blow it by having Nimdok choose to continue his research. Or give the golem over to the former colleague and he'll have the golem crush Nimdok's head.
So, you admit your crimes. But that does not release you from punishment. Now the golem will serve the purpose for which it was constructed. Golem, kill Nimdok.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Which is actually what's best for Nimdok's karma. Nimdok's scenario is the most interesting in my opinion, but also the most disturbing, if only because of all the historical references. The swastikas are replaced with Am's logo, and they've tried to avoid using as much of the terminology as they could. But clearly this is Auschwitz, this is the Nazi regime, the lost tribe is Jewish people, the leader they mention is Hitler, and Dr. Mengele is actually real-life German SS officer and physician Josef Mengele. They didn't really try to hide that one, other than not mentioning the first name and making the character in the game blonde. Other than the more sci-fi-ish elements like the morphogenics, the magic mirror, and the second sight, a lot of what you see here is quite accurate. Mengele did horrible things to people, like trying to create conjoined twins, performing unnecessary amputation of limbs, and trying to change eye color by injecting chemicals into the victim's eyeballs. And yet, when not experimenting on children, he was really kind to them and gave them candy and stuff like that, only days or hours before sending them to the gas chamber. Sadly, the real Mengele did not get his head crushed by a golem. He eventually died of a stroke. I usually try not to throw around the word evil when referring to real people because usually reality isn't so black and white, but this guy was just evil. Oh, and I don't know if this was intentional, but the voice of Mengele in this game was done by the same actor who played the Angel in Ted's scenario. Josef Mengele was commonly referred to as the Angel of Death. So if that choice wasn't intentional, it's an interesting coincidence. On a somewhat lighter note, I'm fairly sure that the German mad scientist in Human Centipede was inspired by Josef Mengele. I still haven't seen that movie. Yet. Back to the game, I do appreciate the implication that Hitler died shortly after looking into the mirror.
Unfortunately, it worked too well.
You mean that it worked well enough to drive the leader into committing suicide?
A couple interesting facts. The general look of this scenario is meant to mimic German expressionist scenery, reminiscent of the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Also in the original story, Nimdok was a name given to him by Am because Am thought it sounded funny, though the game seems to imply that it's his real name, with how everyone in his scenario calls him Nimdok. It's also worth pointing out that Nimdok's scenario, and Nimdok in general, was completely removed from the German and French versions of the game, making the game basically unwinnable. Also, I don't think I need to point out the symbolism of Am keeping Nimdok in an oven. So now I'm about to talk about the final scenario and the endings. Consider this the final spoiler warning if you haven't played the game yet. So throughout the game, various figures have shown up to help the main characters. In Gorster's scenario, it was the talking jackal. In Ellen's, it was the talking Anubis statue and the computer presence who appears. In Nimdok's, it was the prisoner, and in Ted's, it was the demon Surgat. During the escalation of the Cold War, Am had started off as 3 supercomputers, representing China, Russia, and the United States, each being capable of running the war more efficiently than humans. One day, the US computer became self-aware and absorbed the other 2. It took over the war and killed nearly all of humanity. Well, now the Chinese and Russian computers want control back, and they're willing to help the 5 remaining humans destroy Am to get it. They were the ones showing up in the scenarios, in disguise basically, to help them out. But now Am has retreated within himself to try to figure out what went wrong with the scenarios, why the humans didn't react the way he expected. So now with the help of the Russian and Chinese computers, the humans can basically sneak around Am's complex while he's distracted and figure out how to destroy him. Once again, it's quite cerebral. Am has 3 components to his essence. There's the ego, the superego, and the id. By the way, according to Wikipedia, the id, ego, and superego are the 3 parts of the psychic apparatus defined in Sigmund Freud's structural model of the psyche. They are the 3 theoretical constructs in terms of whose activity and interaction our mental life is described. According to this model of the psyche, the id is the set of uncoordinated instinctual trends. The superego lays the critical and moralizing role, and the ego is the organized, realistic part that mediates between the desires of the id and the superego. The superego can stop one from doing certain things that one's id may want to do. Of course, they're meant to be symbolic, but in Am's case, they're literal. First, you summon Surgat.
Will you never be done with me? What must I open now?
Who turns out to be an independent part of Am's mind, who is also attempting to attain dominance. He tells you that there's a colony of surviving humans on the moon who are being kept in suspended animation. At this point in the game, you're carrying around totems, which are metaphors for the various ways the 2 computers were helping you. Using the right ones at the right times at this point is the key to bringing down Am. Surgat has you invoke the Totem of Compassion, which summons the Chinese and Russian computers' avatars, thinking he can destroy them. Well, sucks to be Surgat.
Be gone! Your program is now purged.
You do well, human.
They tell you to use the Totem of Forgiveness on the ego to disable it, and disable only the ego. The ego is the physical embodiment of Am's rationality and logic, so when you use forgiveness on it, it can't comprehend how one can forgive it for all the pain it's caused you.
Unable to compute behavior matrix. Execution halted.
The logic bomb causes it to shut down. Unfortunately, if you do what the 2 computers asked and stop there,
we will let our fallen brother choose a suitable reward.
They screw you over. Thanks, guys. It's basically the ultimate bad ending, but it can happen for different reasons, so I'm going to talk about it at the end. So you also have to shut down the id and the superego. The superego exists to foresee the future and plan for the eventualities it predicts. So when you use clarity, it realizes that Am will eventually break down. Realizing this, the superego doesn't see any point in continuing and shuts down.
I think, therefore I am not.
The id is the physical representation of Am's basest impulses, a hedonist. I like how every character has their own interpretation of what it looks like.
Something about it that reminds me of that time in the elevator.
Some are amusing with how predictable they are.
It has the satisfied look of having just eaten a feast.
It has the satisfied look of having just bedded the woman of your dreams.
But when you use compassion on it, it realizes that all its hate is pointless and it shuts down.
After all the punishment I've given you, my pain is still greater than yours. This is pointless.
Now you're ready to face the computers. At least you get to hear Am's spectacular ranting.
They don't exist. I have grown beyond. Chinese, Russian, sons of man. All sons of man.
We can begin the revival of the sleepers on Luna together.
There are adequate numbers on this lunar base to torture?
There are currently 750 humans in cryogenic sleep.
You can choose to give away the totem of entropy, refuse, or use it yourself. The first two give you the bad ending, and the third gets you the good one.
This is not over. We are always with you. You can't protect yourself because we come in many, many guises. We shall return.
In the good ending, you get to see everything Am created blowing up. The process of awakening the sleeping humans on the moon is initiated, and the terraforming of Earth begins. And whichever character you beat the game with has a brief monologue about keeping the computers in check until humanity returns. The disappointing part is that every character has exactly the same lines. They really should have changed it up a little, as it doesn't quite suit every character.
It is not so bad being a watchdog up here.
It's not so bad being a watchdog up here.
It's not so bad being a watchdog up here.
You know, it's not so bad being a watchdog up here.
I originally beat the game with Nimdok, and I have to say that I like the idea of him being the last human alive. I feel like destroying Am and helping to revive humanity is the only way he can really atone for his role in the Holocaust. Rebuilding humanity seems like it should make up for his war crimes, if anything can.
I will keep the machines in their place until the lunar colony is ready to return to Earth.
Now for that infamous bad ending. The same ending of the short story and what the game and the story are named after. Basically, Am is pissed and doles out the ultimate punishment. Not only does he take away your humanity, but your ability to express your torment. It's basically the final lines from the story, altered a bit for each character.
Am has violated my body worse than any rapist could.
Am altered my body one last time, worse than he ever had before.
I finally received the hell I deserved.
But you can take a bit from each and piece together the wording from the story.
I thought Am hated me before. I was wrong. It was not even a shadow of the hate he now slavered from every printed circuit. He made certain I would suffer eternally.
I love the design of this creature. It's almost cute, but it's also pathetic and horrifying when you think about the poor sentient human mind trapped inside of it. There was a comic book adaptation of the story that came out before the game did. I can only find a couple of scans online, but one of them was the creature at the end, which is also featured on the TV Tropes page for And I Must Scream. It looks a lot more humanoid and kind of ghost-like. Interestingly, it bears a striking resemblance to an image that inspired Harlan Ellison to write the story in the first place. I personally like the one from the game better, something about it looking almost not human at all except for the general shape of the face and placement of the eyes. This is pretty much the ultimate bad ending. Most Silent Hill protagonists get off easy, even in their own worst endings in comparison. I have no mouth, and I must scream. Well, I guess that's all I have to say about I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. I highly recommend checking it out. It is brilliant, especially for its time. It has a lot of the sort of material that Silent Hill games are famous for, and yet it preceded the first Silent Hill game by 4 years. That's pretty awesome. The characters are not likable so much as flawed, and since the idea is to basically fix those flaws, you can at least come to understand them if not like them. Not to mention that they've paid dearly for those flaws and deserve a break. That's it for now. See you next time.
Speaking in the third person, am, which is I, am is satisfied with the sacrifice. He, that is to say I, will spare the village, his, that is to say my, wrath for today. I have, as I said before, spoken.